So I've got a new word that I'm using, a new phrase that I'm using a lot this week. It's useless contrarians. And it's the word I use to describe people who have no positive contribution to moving us towards our goal. All they have, our goals, policy goals specifically, all they have are just pithy reminders of how bad things were with Barack Obama, or how bad things were with, no matter what, it's got to be something Hillary Clinton did. Useless contrarians. If you want to know more about that and figure out if I'm talking about you, go to patreon.com/the BPD show. Let's get on with the show.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
I think it's unfortunate that law enforcement immediately began to criminalize the victim in this case, someone who was clearly the victim. It has absolutely no bearing on the fact that he was shot in his home. I would love to see more information coming out about warrants executed on the home of the shooter who lived just below him. I haven't seen any of those. And so, in particular, for it to be returned on this day, on the day that we remember and celebrate him, to see the common assassination attempt on the victim.
It's the same old playbook, assassinate the character after they assassinate his person. As Attorney Merritt and Attorney Washington said, he didn't kill anybody. He was killed. So why are they trying to assassinate his character now? This is his homecoming. This is his home-going services. His family is celebrating his life, and they are attempting to assassinate his character now that they have assassinated his person.
Those are the voices of Lee Merritt, Esquire, and Benjamin Crump, the two attorneys for the family of Botham-jean, the 26-year-old businessman who was killed in his own home when Amber Geiger came home allegedly thinking that she was going to her own apartment, and killed the man that was in his own apartment because she said she thought it was her apartment. Now, I don't even have the energy to get into how ridiculous of a story that is, and how she had to be under the influence of something. She had to be, to make a mistake that big. But yet, and still, police are looking into drugs in this guy. I mean, I want marijuana, weed, ladies and gentlemen, weed that is so innocuous that I might have a blunt tonight. I mean, it's not even a big deal. Who cares? If he had an ounce of weed, let alone 10 grams, they're reporting that he had 10 grams. Who cares? The Fraternal Order of Police and the police union, and who all the people involved in protecting this woman, this officer, because that's where we are right now. They have a full court press to protect this police officer. And the way they're doing it is by vilifying Botham-jean. His life doesn't mean anything to them. Not in life, and especially not in death. He's just someone for them to smear so that they can get away with this. That is their express duty. And there's a story here. I don't have the capacity right now. And by capacity, I mean the infrastructure and the team. But if I was an editor and had a team, I would assign people to investigate the PR firms that are hired by these police unions to spin these stories. And I would go all the way back to the team that helped in Ferguson. The team that was able, the PR team that was able to shift the entire national conversation by releasing video footage that didn't show the entire encounter of Mike Brown at the convenience store, alleging that he robbed the convenience store, when that had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on. Number one, it had nothing to do with Darren Wilson killing him. Number one. Number two, it didn't show the entire story. How he had made an arrangement with the clerk to hold his belongings. And when he was reaching behind the counter, he was getting what belonged to him. But the PR firms and whoever might just be the attorneys But there's a story there because it's consistently done across this country. The playbook is the same. Kill a nigga, smear a nigga, and you can get away with it. Not only will you get away with it, but you'll get some money out of it. Look at Darren Wilson. Received, a couple $100,000 to do an interview on ABC. Not to mention all the GoFundMe money that was raised for him. Kill a nigga, smear a nigga. Just like Tupac said. Cops give a damn about a Negro. Pull the trigger, kill a nigga, and he's a hero. That's the reality. So if I was the editor of a newsroom, I would assign at least 2 people, possibly 3, to go back to all of these shootings by police officers and to look at how and who they hired and how they went about defaming the person who was killed in order to get them off. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a short list of PR firms that are that work with attorneys for cops. You know, it's a small list because you have this is a specialized craft. You can't just get anybody off the street. You got to get people with no freaking soul, soulless golems, soulless people with nothing but the goal of winning, regardless of what side they're on. There's got to be a short list. And I guarantee you there's probably about 5 firms. This is just me pulling it out of thin air, but because I know how specialized and how soulless you have to be. But then again, we're talking about attorneys generally, even with PR firms, they're attorneys. So no offense to attorneys in my audience, but the chances are you're going to find more soulless people. But I digress. There's a story there. I want to know who these people are. I want to know how many cases they've worked like this. I want to see how many times they replicate the same playbook in each case. And I also want to see how the media is complicit in it, and that they receive these press releases and they just regurgitate it. They become stenographers instead of investigative journalists. They don't question anything. They just report it. And as they report it, it becomes a part of the news cycle, and it becomes a part of the talking points, of the daily talking points. And as it becomes a part of the daily talking points, then it becomes a part of the lexicon. It becomes a part of the public opinion. It becomes baked into the system that Darren Wilson had a blown orbital socket. And then it wasn't until you saw the pictures from the trial that you saw this boy didn't even in so much have a rash around his eye. But they hired somebody to say, oh yeah, I heard that he had a blown orbital socket. That became what was reported from Ferguson. And it became just an all-out, full court press to get these cops exonerated. And then you have the DAs who are complicit in it. The Bob McCullough, he's gone now. Wes, I can't think of Wes's last name right now, who replaced him. But the point is like this is what has been going on for a long time, so long, and This is merely just the extreme example. This is just the extreme example of the same type of crap that happens every time the police kill a black person. And it's not enough to say, oh, this is why we kneel. That's insufficient. We never should have had to explain ourselves why we would want to have a peaceful protest. It's not something that we don't owe you an explanation. So it's insufficient to say, look, this is why they kneel. You ever wonder why? This is why. I appreciate the sentiment, but we shouldn't not. I'm not explaining myself to anyone, especially to people who are willfully ignorant, who don't care the reason behind it, don't care the legitimacy of our qualm, of our angst, of our beef with this system. They don't care about it. They would just as soon look at botham-jean and say, oh well, he had weed, so I guess that's that. It's a multi-step process that they engage in. Earlier this week, they released there was an article that was released saying lawyers say that this off-duty police officer can't be found guilty. A literal article that came out, and turns out that it was a single attorney who said this, but he was hired to say this. Some type of agreement was, hey, Jimmy, would you get over here and say this for us so we can write a story about it? Then they write a story about it. And that becomes baked into the public psyche, into the public conversation, into the discourse. It becomes a part of public opinion. People are now saying, maybe this police officer isn't really as guilty. And the absurdity of it all is that we're talking about a guy who literally was at his home relaxing. Had no encounter, had no one called the police on him. Nobody, the police officer had no right to be there. That's the absurdity of it. But the playbook is the same. This example is so extreme that you get people like Ben Shapiro who see the absurdity in it, and he rightfully maligns it with a bit of sarcasm on Twitter. So he's right in that regard, but he won't extrapolate. He won't draw the conclusion from this and say that this is the playbook. This is what they do. This is how they do it. And they have so much practice and they have so much success with it because of people like Ben Shapiro and conservatives who are ready and willing in almost every other case. Give Ben Shapiro at least this case. This case is so extreme that he can't go for it. It's something. But in every other case, people like him and conservatives like him go along with this narrative that is consistently this procedure that is always carried out by police officers and the police unions and the PR firms that are hired. And the playbook is kill a nigga, smear a nigga. It's a 1-2 step. And then the officer gets off. And they do this right in front of us. Every time the Associated Press regurgitates a press release that's carefully crafted, do you think any of this is by happenstance? No, every statement that's being released from this police agency in Dallas is carefully crafted to be subtle enough not to be obscene and absurd, but to be efficient enough with their language to help this officer get off. There's a story there. And I wonder how many law firms and how many PR firms actually provide this service knowingly. As soon as I get myself a news organization, which might be sooner rather than later, but I digress. As soon as I get myself a news organization, I'm going to assign some people to it. Because that is a story. And that is a not just a story, but that is an evil that has to be exposed. And I don't think that botham-jean is sufficient enough to actually expose the extent of the insidiousness of this technique. I don't think because they're doing it. And they're still doing it. It's not like they've been stopped in their tracks. They're doing it right in front of us. And so I think even though this is the most obscene and absurd example that we've seen, I think they might actually get away with it. I don't know if she's going to be charged, or I don't know if she's going to be found guilty, rather. I don't know, but it requires public opinion. It requires a jury of her peers who are willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. And to say that in that moment she was terrified and that she stood her ground. They're going to describe how big this guy was. That's coming up next. Mark my words, next week it's going to be some combination of his height, his weight, and how she was terrified. Can you see that? Can you see this? Can you see how utterly disgusting this is and infuriating? That they do this right in front of our eyes, and though we may object to it with our voices, these bastards are still doing it with no regard to the life that was stolen, no regard to the family of the man who lost his life, no regard to what this does in the broader narrative of the vilification of black people. They don't even give a damn about that. But the impact that this has, and the ramifications that if this officer can get off for killing somebody who was resting in their home, the precedent that it sets for so many other cases. That's all I have to say about this. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show for more.